Well, good evening and welcome to Yada Yahweh Radio. We have a full concert of characters here this evening. We have both JB and Kirk. How are you, fellas?
Good evening. Good, thank you.
Yeah, good. We're going to start with the news. We didn't cover any news last week, maybe not even the night before, but a number of things I want to talk about. The first is a story that came out of Harvard. And this story to me just shows how it is impossible for academia to think anymore. They may know things to make them professors, but they seem to understand nothing. It was reported by ESPN that calling them long-standing forces of institutional racism. The National Association of Basketball Coaches on Thursday proposed permanently eliminating SAT and ACT requirements as part of the NCAA's initial eligibility process. The proposal originated from the NABC's Committee on Racial Reconciliation. According to a news release from the group, the committee, co-chaired by Harvard's Tommy Amaker and South Carolina's Frank Martin, was formed last month to address racism and social justice issues. The NABC Committee on Racial Reconciliation believes that the SAT and ACT are long-standing forces of institutional racism and no longer have any place in intercollegiate athletics or higher education at large. Amaker and Martin said in a joint statement, "This is an important step towards combating educational inequality in our country. I want to tell you, to make that kind of a statement, you have to be not only an ignoramus, you have to be someone who doesn't know that you just impugned the people that you were trying to call equal. If, in fact, taking the SAT or ACT, which are college entrance exams, simple tests as to whether or not you are proficient in English, mathematics, reasoning, and some minor sciences, as well as history, demonstrates that African Americans score more poorly on average than do other ethnicities. All that demonstrates is not that the test is racist, is that there's a serious problem in the African American community. Our DNA does not render one ethnicity smarter than another ethnicity, with one exception, and that is that SAT tests, IQ tests, show that Jews are on average 15 points smarter than the rest of the world. But apart from that, ethnicity is not a measure of our ability to think, our ability to test, but cultural differences are. It's why there are no advanced educational systems that are indigenous to the Islamic world. It's why there's almost no advances of any material kind in the Islamic world. The religion and the culture dumbs people down. There's something seriously wrong with the African American culture for them to score on average appreciably lower on SAT scores. And to point that out and to say that it's racism is to say you aren't smart enough to figure out that the community is not well educated. And it has nothing to do with the schools. It has all to do with the culture that students are raised. Now, I can't speak for all families, and there are lots of African American families that do precisely what I'm speaking about, but we realized that public education was not enough. And so we sent our children to public schools, just as I went to public schools, for the socialization of it, because that's an extremely important part of growing up. But for the most part, what they learned at home. Yes, it was more work. I could have gone off and just watched television, but instead, in the evening, we read history books. We practiced mathematics. We talked about science. We were constantly speaking about logic and rhetoric. And so we augmented our son's education. I augmented our son's education at home because I thought
you have to do.
that it was important, just as I tried to teach them morality, teach them the kinds of things that would enable them to stand up when it mattered, to show character and backbone. And obviously, test scores are on average lower, as GPAs are on average lower, in the African American community. Nothing to do with race. It's all to do with culture. And if we continue to make excuses for people, they will never prosper. They also noted that students who expect to graduate from high school in time to enroll in Division I schools this coming academic year will be academically eligible by earning a 2.3 grade point average. Isn't that amazing? You try, as a Caucasian, to get into a school with a 2.3 GPA and see how far you get. You know, the fact of the matter is, rather than an important step towards combating educational inequality in our country, we have gone so far to the extreme that if a African American and a Caucasian male both apply to the same school, and one has 300 points lower on their SAT, and one has a full point lower on their GPA, the African American is much more likely to be accepted than the Caucasian. That's just the facts. They brag about the percentage of African Americans they bring in. And if you're an African American woman, the enrollment is your oyster. You can be hundreds and hundreds of points lower on your SAT and a grade point and a half lower, and you'll be accepted over the Caucasian. It's just wrong. But the system is already hugely twisted in favor of African American students. It is one of 100 reasons why the America that Black Lives Matter is protesting does not exist. You know, the fact is that as much as I am frustrated with American politics and the American military and the American justice system and American policing and American patriotism and American interference around the world and the American economy and the American currency and central banks and the like, and there's a lot of things to be frustrated with, and both political parties, the fact remains that America is the least racist country in the history of humankind. And it is the most free. Those are irrefutable facts. You know, politics isn't the only villain. It was announced last week by an Indian court that the royal family can continue to run a temple in India. It's one of the world's richest places of worship. This was from the Supreme Court. After the family patriarch died, the Kerala state government tried to take over the Sri, and it is a long word with way too many vowels, but I'll make an attempt to butcher it. Padman Abhaswamy Temple. Don't ask me to say that again. The Kerala's High Court ruled in the government's favor, a decision now reversed by the Supreme Court. When one of the temple's vaults was opened in 2011, it was found to contain riches worth more than, all right, guys, guess. What do you think?
Trillion.
This is a place of worship where we'll all go there as humble servants of our God, gods in this case, how much would you think was in one of those vaults?
Of course, should be empty. They're giving the money away to help people.
You should be. If you're making a donation, it should have gone to maintain the temple and then to help people. Correct? Should be zero. One of the vaults.
Maybe a little rainy day fund.
$20 billion.
$20 billion.
And
one vault.
One vault, 20 billion. And so when the royal family received the access to the 20 billion just in one of those vaults, they said, "Oh, it was an answer to prayer, and all the people who prayed for us, it's such an answer to their prayers too." If you're stupid enough to make a donation to these morons, I'm glad they have your money, because you have no earthly idea what to do with it. If you make a donation to the Roman Catholic Church, shame on you. It's just stupid. God doesn't need money. He doesn't want money. And these religious buffoons are just enriching themselves and have always done so. Speaking of political buffoons, sometimes nature just has a way of paying you back. There's a total of 443 rivers now that are in flood stage in China, with 33 of them swelling to the highest levels. The majority of these rivers are in the vast basin of the Yangtze River. There's a dam on the Yangtze River.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah. In fact, you look at satellite pictures, it's all bent out of shape. And they say, "Oh, there's no problem with this dam." But they were the same people that say, "Oh, there's no problem with the virus here. Don't look behind the curtain. No problem at all." The Yangtze River is at flood stage, and that dam is compromised. I watched a video yesterday. It was the most hilarious thing. I don't know if you guys all saw the video, but it was about 4 years ago, and Joe Biden was debating on the vice presidential debate, and he says, "I want to make 3 points. The first point is, well, you should vote for me because I'm a really good guy. And the second point is, moving on, I want to make another point." He did. Couldn't come up with a second point. Couldn't come up with a third point. So this time, Joe Biden wants to curse out Donald Trump, and so he has what appears to be a stroke, and then it was, "We Basio, China, Trump, undocumented because relocated asparagus, doesn't taste, closes lower, dribble drives." Okay.
Huh? Yeah, I think he had a stroke.
He tied together 30 words that had absolutely no relationship to one another. And just looked at the camera. You should Google it. Did Biden have a stroke? You can watch it for yourself. It's worse than my imitation of it. Joe Biden, speaking of idiots, listen, everybody knows I am anti-political. I blight on both their parties. I take Yahowah's view. There's no such thing as a good politician. They're all egomaniacs. In all honesty, though, it's just like admitting what the truth is about America. Donald Trump was on the news today saying, there's a serious problem with drugs. And we're talking about the legal kind. Because American companies spend billions of dollars getting these drugs tested and through the FDA. And Americans pay for all of that testing and more with their prices. And these drug companies then sell the same drugs to the rest of the world for pennies on the dollar. And he says, that's just got to stop. American taxpayers are funding all of that research in colleges and the like, and American companies are paying for all of that research, and then Americans pay through the nose for the drugs, and the rest of the world gets them at a fraction of the price. Says, no. It's just going to stop. It never should have been that way in the first place. There are things the guy says and does that actually make sense. Well, this is something that Joe Biden says that does not make sense. Joe Biden said on Monday that he would overturn, on his first day in office, President Donald Trump's travel ban that initially targeted Muslim-majority countries. Biden, the presumptive Democratic nominee for president, said that Muslims were the first to suffer attacks under the Trump administration, and it led to kids being bullied in school and to an increase in hate crimes. Well, Muslims are responsible for 95% of the world's terrorist acts worldwide. They were responsible for 9/11. It was an act of fundamentalist Islam. And Islam, as it was lived by Muhammad, is a terrorist doctrine. That's not my opinion. I'm not being pejorative. It is a statement of fact. Muhammad said, and the Quran also says, that if a Muslim is not a jihadist, they cease to be a Muslim, and that it is the duty of good jihadist Muslims to kill them. It is impossible to be a good Muslim and not be a terrorist. Said another way, all good Muslims are terrorists. That is by definition in the Quran. And this moron, Joe Biden, who is way too old and senile to be president of the United States, says that the first thing he's going to do is allow Muslims to flood into this country. Why not make it like the rest of Europe, which is now so anti-Semitic that it's almost impossible for a Jew to live? He said that that Trump appointed unnamed key leaders in the Defense Department, the United States Agency for International Employment, despite their open Islamophobia. I'm going to tell you, folks, if you have the courage to do what I'm doing, to speak out against Islam, you are not afraid of it. Muslims are lethal.
Yeah.
They kill people who expose the truth about Muhammad, Allah, and Islam, as well as the Quran. You are the opposite of an Islamophobe when you expose and condemn the religion for what it actually is. He wants to say Donald Trump has fanned the flames of hate in this country. No, the flames of hate were fanned by fundamentalist Muslims. That's just a statement of fact. For that alone, I would condemn anyone who would vote for Joe Biden. I'm not a one-issue individual, but this is so counter to America's interest, so ignorant that anyone who would vote for such a man, shouldn't be allowed to vote. It is that stupid.
Travis, I was going to say the tragedy is that the liberal Yehudim in this country will vote Democratic.
Yeah, that's correct.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Oh, yeah. Overwhelming. Travis County, which is home to Austin, is expected to vote on a 10-year lease and tax rebates totaling some $65 million to relocate a portion of Tesla's car manufacturing. You know, Tesla, as a car manufacturer now, has made it into the Standard & Poor's 5,000. It is one of the most rapidly growing success symbols in the history of mankind. It's amazing what that man has done with his kind of childish exuberance for just making things better. Anyway, the plant will come with 5,000 to 7,000 jobs and ultimately 20,000 jobs. I mean, this is an extraordinary thing. In California, you know what the average wage is of a Tesla worker in the California plant?
$40 an hour?
$98,000 a year. $98,000 a year.
Okay.
And, of course,
a new job.
One of the congresswoman for his district said F. Musk, when Musk said, if you're going to keep my plant shut down, I'm just going to move my plant. So she said F. Musk, and he is going to move his plant, as he should.
Wow.
So anyway, 20,000 jobs, and the average wage of a Tesla worker is $98,000 a year. But this article, it's amazing how ignorant even the journalist was. But some Austin residents have told officials they are skeptical about subsidizing. They're not subsidizing anything. Subsidizing would mean that you take monies that taxpayers have paid, and you give it to them. And you say, what the hell? We'll build your damn plant and you own it. Now, if they subsidize it, it would be if it subsidizes it. We'll build the plant, but we own it, and you can lease it from us at a reduced rate. That still wouldn't be subsidizing. Subsidizing is giving him the money. No, what they're doing is saying, if you come here, we'll diminish some of your property taxes, some of your other kind of taxes, which if he doesn't come there, the amount of taxes that they are giving up is zero. So what they're basically saying, we understand that if you don't come here, we collect nada, nothing. If you do come here, we're willing to reduce what you pay us. That's not a subsidy. That is just smart because the man is going to establish his business and the place that takes the less from him. So all they're talking about is how much we're going to take from you to do this enormous good of bringing in 7,000 to 20,000 jobs. And yet,
plus they'll still be paying taxes. They just won't be getting as much in taxes as if they didn't give them the rebate.
Who is probably on a full scholarship at University of Texas, told officials that they're skeptical of subsidizing what is the world's most valuable auto company. Oh, no. Quote, instead of focusing to get people a living wage, you're giving tax breaks to a company that's worth billions. That makes no sense, said the senseless Sylvia Zuveta Rodriguez, a student at the University of Texas, totally squandering the educational opportunity. She's told officials at a recent counter hearing. Good God, woman! These people make an average of $98,000 a year. He is going to create 7,000 to 20,000 of those jobs. And you're not subsidizing anything. You're just taking less from him. And why don't you, if you're so damn smart, why don't you create a business that pays a living wage? Because who in the hell is going to pay it if you don't have businesses? You, Miss Zuveta Rodriguez? Who's going to pay it?
It's a real simple thing. If Tesla's not there, how much taxes is Texas getting from Tesla? Zero. If Tesla's there, we're going to get at least something. It's a net gain no matter what. It's a question of, well we're not going to get as much as if we didn't give them the rebates, but we're still going to get some. Some better than one.
It's a matter of, do you want 7,000 high-paying jobs and $10 million a month in taxes, or do you want no high-paying jobs and nothing per month for taxes? That's your choice.
Now, wait a minute.
And this woman isn't smart enough to figure that out. And the journalist couldn't say, I want to apologize here for this woman. This is the choice. We either get nothing from Tesla or we get millions of dollars from Tesla. We either get no new jobs or we get a ton of new jobs. And, oh, by the way, they are really high-paying jobs.
Well, that's the thing, though. They don't want high-paying jobs for people with skilled labor. They want us to give high-paying jobs to people that have no skill. That's what they mean by living wage. Someone who has no skill should be making $98,000 a year. You have to have a skilled job to work at Tesla, and make that kind of money. You have to have an actual skill and contribute something, not just burgers at a restaurant.
A huge percentage of the Tesla workers are factory workers. Blue-collar jobs. These are very high blue-collar jobs. What you really have to do to get a blue-collar job is you've got to know how to groom yourself so you can pass the interview, have to speak intelligently, have to be able to read, have to be able to write, and have to have the discipline to show up on time and not take drugs. You're going to be tested for drugs.
This is Austin we're talking about.
So if you're in an ethnicity,
there's not a lot of people in Austin who fit that.
Right. So, George Floyd, the one that they want to riot over, he couldn't qualify. Not because he was a drug addict. He's been a drug addict for the last 20 years. He tested positive, been arrested for everything under the sun, tested positive for everything under the sun. Drug addict. You can't get the job if you're a drug addict. You can't get the job if you dropped out of high school. You can't get one of those jobs if you show up to the interview with your pants around your knees. I mean, there are things you have to be able to do. Trump, trailing in opinion polls behind Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden, in June declared himself to be the president of law and order and threatened to send U.S. military into cities after some violent protests and looting in the aftermath of American George Floyd's death in police custody in Minnesota. Federal agents last week began cracking down on Portland's protest. You know that there's been riots in Portland every night since the police killed that idiot? I mean, did he?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to call George Floyd an idiot. I mean, he's any man that would do what he did, hold a gun against a woman's belly and pistol whip her so that he could rob her. That's a scum. And a man that would pass counterfeit bills and drive under the influence, who had both fentanyl. Anybody that uses fentanyl is an idiot. And was also on methamphetamines. So to riot on behalf of an idiot is stupid. But beyond all that, they have protested in Portland now ever since that occurred. Now, you can't tell me that they're protesting because they're protesting police brutality or racism. No, they're protesting because they love it, because they want to tear down the country, because they get their giggles out of disrupting life because they have no lives. They're a bunch of losers with no legitimate cause, and it's disgusting that so many in the media and so many in prominent positions in this country are endorsing them. We have losers that just want to destroy, people that haven't created anything of value. And so what Trump is saying, even when you're not burning stuff down, even when you're not looting, you're still disruptive because all of the businesses now that are in downtown Portland, they're shut down.
Mm-hmm.
All of downtown Portland that people have paid taxes to have access to, you can't visit. There's a consequence of that. You made your stupid point, which is that you have no issue. Stop it already. And so Trump sent in federal agents. And there's now this war between the protesters and the federal agents. And it's hard to tell which one is more brutal. But now they're having a conniption fit that the mayors and governors of liberal states say, yeah, it's okay that forget about COVID and forget about social distancing. We want people to be able to protest because those are my voters. And you can't shut them down. No, I stand with them even when they're looting. It was recently revealed, this is from last week, that a board member of Black Lives Matter, affiliated program in charge of tens of millions of dollars raised by the organization, in fact, a fundraiser for the organization that has just recently raised $6 million for them, is a convicted terrorist. Not only a convicted terrorist by the administration that just continues to give, the Clinton administration. Her name is Susan Rosenberg. She's often described as an American activist, writer, and advocate for social justice and prisoners' rights. Oh, yes, the left just loves these anarchists. From the late 1970s until the mid-80s, Rosenberg was active in the far-left revolutionary terrorist May 19th communist organization. Why? Because Black Lives Matter is a communist organization, which, according to contemporaneous FBI reports, openly advocated the overthrow of the United States government through armed struggle and the use of violence. She is the leading fundraiser and on the board for Black Lives Matter. M19CO provided support to an offshoot of the Black Liberation Army, including an armored truck armored truck robberies and later engaged in bombings of government buildings. Rosenberg herself, the peaceful protester that she is, was arrested in 1984 while unloading a car from her car into a New Jersey storage unit, hundreds of pounds of dynamite, along with weapons, including a submachine gun. But she's a peaceful protester. She had also was sought as an accomplice in the 1979 prison escape of Astata Shakur and in the 1981 Brinks robbery that resulted in the death of 2 policemen and a guard, although she was never charged in either case, opting for a plea deal instead. Rosenberg was sentenced to 58 years in prison on weapons and explosive charges, but she spent 16 of those years in prison. Her sentence was commuted to time served by President Bill I'm an idiot and a sexual pervert, Clinton, the favorite writer of the Lolita Express in 2001 on his final day in office. Boy, if you were to pick a slimier, more disgusting individual, I don't know how you'd find one. And yet, now she is raising millions of dollars, $6.4 million just in the last statement, for this wonderful, peaceful protesting organization called Black Lives Matter. Speaking of disgusting, Turkish President Recep Erdogan paid a surprise visit to Hagia Sophia on Sunday, just days before the first Muslim prayers were due to be held in the Istanbul landmark. He converted it into a mosque. Yeah, it was built as a church before Islam even existed. But Islam can't build anything on its own, can't create anything on its own, is only good at stealing or destroying, and decided to steal it and convert it into a mosque. Can you imagine what the world would say if Jews in Israel scraped the Dome of the Hopi print, the Dome of the Rock, and Alaska Mosque off the Temple Mount because Muslims built their shrines there in the 8th century? What in the world would the world say? And yet Erdogan, a far more prestigious shrine, Christian church, converts it into a mosque, and no one cares. Talk about a double standard. Left-wing news sources clamored in unison this week against Donald Trump because he began to push back from Fauci. He's had his fill of it. Man, I had my fill of Fauci the first time I saw him on one of those COVID-19 shows. I just looked at him and said, this man is no good. This is a man that would only fool a fool that is in it for one reason, and that's himself. And so my instinct said, this is a really bad man who is a dishonest and incompetent man. So I did a little research. First thing I found, I reported on the show, was that Fauci had stolen his way to his PhD. He took another individual's dissertation on HIV and claimed it as his own. He then grew in popularity in the Obama administration when he did something that was exceedingly despicable. When Obama did something wise and shut down American research on viruses and said it was illegal to research viruses in America because of the potential consequence, Fauci found that the French were building a viral lab in Wuhan, China, even though the French were not able to complete it to international standards, and that the Chinese military took over the construction, and that it was operating under the Chinese military control. It was the United States, via Fauci, that funded it to the tune of $250 million. Fauci has been wrong on everything. But he is a darling of the left, and Trump finally has the chutzpah to push back and say, I'm not parading this guy around anymore. He's been wrong about way too much. And here's the problem. We talked about it initially. You can't fight the virus by shutting down the economy and by removing people's liberty. What you end up doing is nothing but postponing deaths. And in the process, you destroy the currency and economics, businesses, which are the only hope you have of surviving as a people. And so the damage you do is so severe. By shutting the economy down just for 2 months, it's irrecoverable. And these morons, you live in one of those states, Kirk,
yes.
have shut down the country again. And the leftists just love depriving people of their liberty. It's in their DNA. And depriving people of their livelihood. It's in their DNA. It's who they are. And they relish it. And this opportunity to do it again. Because I don't want anybody to die. Well, the fact of the matter is, what happened? Exactly what I said was going to happen. You shut everything down, it's going to be like nothing ever happened. And when you open things back up, because you have to, the disease is going to go on unmitigated because you did nothing to stop it. It was an absolute waste. Is corona deadly? Yeah. We have no idea how deadly. No, we really don't. We know that it appears that somewhere in the range of 80% of the people that get COVID-19 are asymptomatic. Kirk, what happens if you're asymptomatic and you want to get tested for COVID?
Well, without talking about anything personal, my understanding is you can't get a test unless you have symptoms.
Right. You even tried to get a test.
They don't have enough tests to do it.
Well,
it's not that.
The fact of the matter is almost very few places can you get a test unless you're symptomatic. That's just the fact. And 80% of people that get corona are asymptomatic. And that doesn't count now the number of people that get it, have symptoms, but the symptoms are manageable.
Flu-like.
And the last thing they want to do is go to a place where other people are being tested for coronavirus, and they just don't get tested. We have no idea how many people have gotten it. And the antibody test that they've tried to give in larger amounts in certain places to find out what the correlation is between those who have tested positive and those who have actually gotten the disease are more than 50% unreliable. So we're back to, we haven't got a clue. My guess is that the coronavirus is more lethal than the common flu. The common flu is 1 in 1,000 people that gets it dies from it. This is probably half of 1%, so 5 times more lethal than the flu. So my guess is it's half of 1% once we know the actual number that are infected. Our biggest concern on corona is that the antibodies don't seem to have much longevity. And if the initial tests on antibodies, which is now showing that they are effective for 2 to 3 months, if that's the case, then the vaccine's not going to work. It just won't work. I mean, if you can't get
it's just going to become another flu.
Right. If you can't get it a couple of months more from the vaccine, you are not accomplishing anything that's going to help people. So you're back to herd immunity as being the only way out of this thing. And you have another problem in America, which is that the conspiracy nuts on vaccines are crazy. I mean, I even had somebody send me an email on it the other day. You're laughing, JB, because they also CC'd you. And claiming that I watched a person and she was in tears crying on how she knows that these vaccines are specifically designed to give people cancer. Well, first of all, he had got a clue with how the vaccines are designed or what they're going to do, because guess what? The vaccines have not been released. But beyond all of that, the research being done at Oxford, the research being done at universities on behalf of the United States, the research being done on behalf of the Chinese and around the world. So the British are doing it, the Germans are doing it, the French are doing it, the Americans are doing it, the Russians are doing it, the Chinese. We have people around the world that are working on a vaccine. They're working independently on a vaccine. All these vaccines are going to be slightly different, and I'll guarantee you, not one of these vaccines is being designed to give people cancer. And the likely correlation between a virus that has a little Ebola, a little HIV, a little SARS, a little MERS, a little this, a little of that, is going to have zero effect on cancer because guess what? Cancer is not a virus. But people are so convinced that the government is out to kill them and control them with vaccines. I guess it's the same crowd that thinks that the government is trying to poison you from 35,000 feet with chemtrails. But with enough conspiracy kooks in America, none of the people would, even if we had a functional vaccine, none of the people would take it. We talked about what was necessary if we were going to beat the coronavirus. And since the coronavirus caused the insane reaction of politicians, where our world was changed one instant to another, we went from normal to so abnormal it's hard to even fathom based upon the world's fear-mongering on this virus, whereby liberty was canceled. Governments didn't care about constitutions, just said, you can't do all of these things that you normally did, and you can't even go to work. That was so draconian. Then in the midst of that, we had Black Lives Matter that's fundamentally changing the world as we know it, and it's worldwide. So these are things we have to pay attention to because we're now so close, 13 years to the end of the world as we know it. And under those circumstances, these are kind of things we should have anticipated, but I did not think they would happen this early. But there was a sane approach to the coronavirus. As I tell people all the time, what we did in World War II to respond to the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor was insane. When we sacrificed 300,000 lives to avenge the deaths of 3,000. It was insane. But coronavirus is the same thing. There were two entirely sane models. Nobody wants to talk about them. But two countries didn't deprive anybody of their liberty. They didn't deprive anybody of their livelihoods. They simply did intelligent things, and their infection rates and death rates are nil compared to the rest of the world. We're talking about Taiwan and South Korea. What they simply did is people trusted their government because, well, those governments were more trustworthy than the U.S. government. And they told people, you ought to wear masks when you go out in public. And they put on masks. They didn't have a bunch of idiots protesting, you can't tell me where I got to wear a mask. They told people, you need to wear a mask when you go out in public. You're not so much protecting yourself as you are protecting others. Mm-hmm. Number two, you got to wash your hands, and we're going to put hand sanitizer everywhere. We're going to put every public place, every entrance to every building. We're going to put hand sanitizer. Every restaurant, every bar, you name it, hand sanitizer. Wash your friggin' hands. But the most important thing they did is telephone tag. They simply offered an app, and that anybody who tested positive, they tracked where they had been the prior 2 weeks, and they tracked the phones of everybody that was in those places at the time they were there, and they sent a text message to them that said, you were at a place where somebody had the coronavirus, you need to go get tested, and they tracked those individuals. And then if they were positive, they did the same thing with them, and they were able to confine the people that got it very early on. But in the United States, knowing that our government has abused their spine and their spine on us with our cell phones and every other way, you had two problems. One is Americans wouldn't trust the government to run an app like that, even though the American government, through its spy agencies, is far more capable of this regard.
Already does.
Right. The government doesn't want to do it because they don't want to reveal their capabilities or the fact that they're already doing it. And so instead, a couple of 100,000 Americans are going to die to protect the spy agencies, and because the government up to this point hasn't earned people's trust. But that's all it took. That's all it took. Sane response as opposed to insane. There was a poll that was taken. What's the craziest thing that Biden has said? And it reads, the resolution states that racism in all of its forms causes persistent discrimination and desperate outcomes in many areas of life, including housing, education, health, employment, safety, and the criminal justice system. So, the Minneapolis City Council has said that we're going to publicly state that racism is rampant in our city, probably the least racist city in America. I mean, you even have little Mogadishu in Minneapolis. Probably as little racism there as about any other place. But they have a resolution that says that racism is persistent in America. So the city council is recognizing the severe impact of racism on what is the least racist country on earth. And they're now going to advocate funding and staff to reverse the consequence of racism. We're going to allocate dollars in the mayor's budget directed towards small business and development, housing, and community-based infrastructure and other amenities to reverse and repair the harm experienced by the BIPOC, whatever that stands for. So what they're going to do is be racist, and they're going to say, well, we're going to be discriminatory in where we send our taxpayer funds, and if you are black, well, you might get them. If you're white, arrivederci, go someplace else. Kanye West. Do you guys hear what Kanye West had to say this week?
No.
Oh, yeah, Kanye West. He decided he's running for president. He's a rapper. Very popular rapper, a black rapper. He's going to run for president. So he gets up and he says, all right. This is what we want to do. I want every African woman that has a child to be paid $1 million per child. And the way we're going to pay them $1 million per child is we're going to have Israel funded, at least for every African woman. Yep. The other thing was he says, but what we're going to also do is we're going to buy 500 acres for $100,000 in Middle America and build a farm and give it to families so that they can grow their own food. Now, what do you think the likelihood of taking some inner city kid that is a drug addict and in a gang and saying, here's 500 acres. You go out here and farm it. Oh, by the way, you got to get up at 4:30 in the morning, so you're at work out there, and it's backbreaking work at 5 o'clock. You got to be able to buy seeds. You've got to be able to buy and run equipment, and you have to harvest it. You have to know how and when to apply pesticides and fertilizers. And by the way, if it doesn't rain, you may lose your entire crop. Backbreaking work, but here's your opportunity.
I'm just going to go work the corner dealing drugs for the local organization.
Oh, good.
That pays good cash right up front.
So, between the two, I was saying, okay, the man has a serious problem. And come to find out, 3 days after, he came out and said that, Israel should give every African mother $1 million per child.
Why Israel?
Giving them $1,000 per child would be stupid. But $1 million per child, I mean, it's just nothing. So his wife, Kanye Kardashian West. My husband's got a mental problem. My husband's got a bipolar and this and that, and I'm really sad. And you got to disregard all of his anti-Semitic remarks. Well, enough news.
He also came out a couple weeks ago saying that the COVID is a hoax, and any vaccine that comes out of it will be the mark of the beast.
Oh, yeah. Probably a Christian pastor, right?
No, that was Kanye. He tweeted that.
He's a Christian
because Elon Musk replied to it with, "I think we may have less in common than I initially thought." Because originally Elon Musk had endorsed him. He read that and said, yeah, I'm backing away from this.
Yeah. Elon Musk ought to stay out of politics because, sorry. All right. We were reading.
Everyone has their areas where they're good. Stick to that.
Yeah, he's really good at a lot of things, and engineering is the key thing he is good at. Politics is not one of them. A Mizmor of Dode, Yahweh is my shepherd. We read that last week. But when you look at the title of God, God is a title. It's not a name. Yahweh is a name. It's not a title. The title God. How's it written? It's 2 letters. Aleph, which is a ram's head, and a lamed, which is a shepherd's staff. So the title that Yahweh chose for himself is of a male lamb living with the flock, is presenting himself as a shepherd that is one with the flock. That's the title God. Mm-hmm. So we should not be surprised that Dode would call Yahweh his shepherd. Yahweh picked Dode because he was a shepherd. Yahweh uses the shepherd metaphor a great deal, and it's because the shepherd lives with the sheep, that the sheep and the shepherd have a symbiotic relationship. The shepherd and the sheep have are mutually beneficial and a symbiotic relationship with one another. And he says, I shall not be deprived. We talked about that. It says that what he's saying is that I'm not going to be negated. And that's the essence of Christianity, is negating Dode. Everything that Yahweh promised Dode, that he was the Messiah, that he was the Son of God, that he was the chosen one, that he was the essence of the second coming, that he was the King of Kings, that he was the branch. Everything that Yahweh promised Dode was given by Christians to their Jesus, because without the promises that God made to Dode, Jesus has no credibility. You can't make Jesus anything more than the Passover lamb if you don't rob Dode of the things that God promised him. And so the statement is saying, Yahweh is my shepherd. And as a result of Yahweh being my shepherd, I'm not going to be deprived. I'm not going to be negated. I'm not going to recede. I'm not going to be decreased. I'm not going to be reduced in status, because Yahweh is my shepherd. And my shepherd promised these things to me. Therefore, Christians, the world's most popular religion, can't rob me of them and give them to a mythical character. It's a stunning statement. It's a refutation of replacement theology. And most Christians don't even know the concept of replacement theology. They have no concept that their religion is based on it. But without replacement theology, there is no Christianity. Because God never speaks of a church, never once. He never once speaks of Gentiles having a political or religious entity other than to condemn it. And so he is constantly talking about his people are Yisrael and Yehudah, and that he is returning for Yisrael and Yehudah, and that he's renewing his covenant with Yisrael and Yehudah. So there is absolutely no room for a Gentile organization, much less a church, unless you ignore everything that God said and simply state, well, everything that God did say, which we're all going to ignore, was on behalf of Yisrael and Yahowah and on behalf of his Torah and his one and only covenant, all goes to us, and now there's a second covenant, and we're the beneficiaries, and everything he promised to Israel is now for us.
But he also does not put that in our hearts. He does put the Torah in our hearts, but he doesn't put the New Testament in our hearts. So now you got another negative.
Of course.
When
when he returns, he's in. And when he renews the covenant and returns for Israel and Yahowah, he's writing his Torah in our hearts, which means, guess what? He ain't replacing.
Ain't no New Testament there.
No. He extends me in flourishing and growing pastures. Dode has been extended, stretched out, reached out for our benefit. Dode enables those who study what he had to say, who pay attention to his life and lyrics, to flourish. We thrive in befitting homelands, in gorgeous settlements, in beautiful encampments, which is what the word Nahwah means for pastures. And then it says, he leads me beside restful waters. The concept here is that water is the universal source of life. That's why when scientists look for life in other places, they're always looking for liquid water. Life emerged from liquid water. And the water is an amazing thing. You know, we don't wash ourselves with hydrochloric acid. We don't wash ourselves with oil or diesel fuel. We don't wash ourselves with mud or dust. We wash ourselves with water because water is the universal solvent. And so he leads me beside these restful waters because water is the source of life. It is the source of cleansing and perfection. And it's the word for restful, manuka, is a place of repose and reflection, of rejuvenation and satisfaction. He restores my soul. Shub. Changes, restores, renews, returns. The beauty of Dode, and it has always been for this reason that Dode is called the Son of God, that all this attention is drawn to Dode. The Dode is called the living embodiment of the covenant, is because everything that Yahweh promised Dode to some degree applies to us. We're not going to be king of Israel. I don't want to be. But we become royalty when we're adopted into Yahweh's family. We aren't going to be the product of the second coming, as Dode will be, but yet those of us who are harvested and the true harvest are going to return. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Dode's soul was restored. Our souls will be restored. Dode was empowered and enlightened and made courageous and became immortal. All those things also apply to us. Dode was the Son of God. We become adopted children in the covenant family through Pesach, Matzah, Bakurim, and then empowered and enriched on Shabbat. So he restores my soul. Every one of us can read that in first person. Instead of he restores my soul, as we're reading this as Dode saying that Yahweh, as his shepherd, restores, changes, renews, and returns his soul, we can all read this as first person. He restores my soul too, and your soul. Now, it's interesting, and I really haven't kept up as much currently as I should with J.K., who began to send me some interesting things on soul based upon some of the discussions we had 2 and 3 weeks ago on Yahweh's soul being part of Yosha, so that he could serve as the Pesach lamb and have a meaningful fulfillment of matzah leading to Bakurim. And so that soul is is very much like a probe, artificial intelligence inside of a probe. If it wasn't for the origin of the word, for modern listeners, modern ears, you would call it an avatar. That Yahweh's soul inside of Yosha made Yosha an avatar. An avatar is a person projecting themselves into another realm. And so the definition of the term is fine. The problem with using avatar, so I have to be careful, is that avatar is a Indian, Hindu god that projects him or herself into another realm, is where the term came from. But its definition among young people is that they have no idea of that connotation. They just know that it's the projection of a personality, our own personality in some situations, into a different realm. One of the things that J.K. was talking about is how Yahweh breathed the Nasalma into Adam, the breath of life, if you will, into Adam, that Adam became a living soul as a result of what Yahweh did. And so it is that to some degree then, since that came from Yahweh, was breathed into him, and breath is also, the Hebrew for breath is also a cognative of nefesh, soul. That soul is Yahweh's soul, that we all have a little bit of Yahweh in us. And then when you think of that, just think of that for a moment, that the first man created in Yahweh's image, where the soul that was placed into that man came from Yahweh, so he had a bit of Yahweh's soul within him. That being the case, when we use shub and saying he restores, he changes, renews, and returns my soul, then we become reintegrated into Yahweh. Our souls do when they are restored and returned. So it is very possible here that we have a little bit of Yahweh in us. The goal is to reconnect. That would make reconciliation and restoration and renewal and return and the invitation to come back home and the covenant family all become integrated into the whole that is Yahweh. Life becomes an extension of Yahweh, just as energy that created this universe was an extension of Yahweh. He spoke it into existence. And matter is simply organized energy. And that life could also be, in terms of animal life, the soul, the consciousness also from Yahweh. So it makes us much more integrated into the concept of God calling us home. So he restores and returns my soul. It says he guides me in the proper and correct way of life for his name's sake. Powerful, because the Yara, which is the basis of the title Torah, according to God, he literally defines Torah as based upon the verb Yara. Yara means source from which guidance, instruction, direction, and teaching flow. And so when the shepherd's shepherd speaks of his shepherd, and he says that he guides me, he directs my path such that I can lead, creating opportunities in a mutually reliant state, predicated upon trust. That when the shepherd's shepherd says he guides me, it's very much like saying he Torahs me. He guides me, he Torahs me. In the proper and correct way of life, which is Bamagal Sadak. Yahweh has laid out for us a path to walk. That path is emblazoned into the conditions and the benefits of the covenant. We walk away from religion and politics, from societal customs. You know, I was railing against the societal customs in the African American communities that is causing so much mayhem and destruction and death in those communities, so that because Black Lives Matter, it's important to address those societal deficiencies. They're not ethnic deficiencies, they're societal deficiencies. And Yahweh says, I want you to walk away from your society. I want you to walk away from your country. I want to walk away from the influence of Babylon, which is based on Babel, to confuse by intermixing. I want you to walk away from your father's home, which would be the family of man. That's the proper and correct path. And then he says, I want you to trust and rely on me. I want you to walk to me and become perfect. The only way you can walk to God and become perfect is through the door of Pesach, over the threshold of unyeasted bread, so that our souls become immortal and perfected, so that then we can be adopted ad Bakurim into Yahweh's family. He guides me in the proper and correct path. That path is through the Mikra, the invitations to be called out and meet, beginning with Pesach, Matzah, Bakurim, Shavua, and concluding with Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. And there, the path is also reflected in the terms and conditions of the covenant. That path is guided through the Torah, which means to guide. And then he says, I'm doing this. He says he is doing this for his name's sake. Now, why would Dode say that Yahweh is guiding him in the proper path, the proper way of life for his, God's, name's sake? What is he saying?
Well, that is his character. That is renown. Everything about his name is the character of Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yahweh benefits from this.
And of course, that too.
JB, what's your daughter's last name?
Bowen.
What's your last name?
Bowen.
What's your wife's last name?
Bowen.
So, if Yahweh is guiding us in the proper path for his name's sake, what is he trying to do?
Make us his children.
Yes. He is offering his name to his children, which makes us family. Right? Mm-hmm. That's what he is saying here. He is guiding me in the proper path for his name's sake, because we become Yada Yahweh, Craig Yahweh, Kirk Yahweh, James Yahweh. Mm-hmm. That's what we become. He's offering us his name, so that our last name, regardless of who our father may have been, our last name is the same as the greatest name in the universe, Yahweh. I'll tell you what, if I could change my name to Yahweh, I'm being offered the opportunity to change my name so that my name is
Ben
Yahweh, Ben Yahweh. I'm all over that.
Sign me up.
Sign me up. That's a win-win.
You said this a long time ago, and it sounds even better now.
Yes.
Guess we're smarter now.
Even though I walk through the valley of darkness and shadows, I will not be afraid, for indeed you are with me. This was part of what we reviewed again last week, but this is such a magnificent declaration. It's so poorly understood that I'm happy to reinforce it in every possible way. And what Dode is saying is, it's one thing to walk away from your country, from the family of man, from your father's house, from societal influences, from religion and politics. one thing to say, I've walked away from that. We're still in this world, and this world is really screwed up. This is a world of politicians responding stupidly to COVID-19 and changing the world fundamentally, destroying economies, destroying liberty, destroying character, creating opportunities for anarchy in the midst of the blow-up of the idiocy of Black Lives Matter, and trying to convert the world to communism and condemn free enterprise, condemn the representative governments, and impose the kind of governments that have been the worst in human history. It's almost impossible to find a more inhuman and deadly and destructive government than the Soviets in Russia, than the Mao's Chinese Communist Party, than North Korea's communist government. They're the worst governments on earth. They're worse than the Islamic governments, and that's what they want. So we are still walking in a very corrupt world. And so Dode is saying, even though I walk through the valley of darkness and shadows, of foreboding gloom and danger, even with the potential of death and of lesser dimensional adaptations of the truth. That's what we're walking in. The truth is exceedingly unpopular. When you tell people the truth, they become very angry. But Dode didn't withdraw from doing his job. And we shouldn't either. We can withdraw from being allied with our government, with supporting our government, with voting for one party or another, and still engage in exposing and condemning it. But where it makes sense to complement it, we should do that as well. That doesn't mean that we're aligning ourselves with it. We're just being fair and honest. That's what Dode did. We ought to expose why it was stupid for us to invade Afghanistan and Iraq, and how that led to what we're witnessing in Syria, and how it was stupid to depose the dictator in Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, and how that was counterproductive. We ought to recognize that the world around us is filled with darkness and shadows, and be a light within it. Dode was not afraid of engaging. He had the courage to confront evil, that which is displeasing and wrong, because he knew Yahweh was with him. That was the deal that I thought I was cutting with God. I said, Yahweh, I'll do this if we do it together. But the moment we're not together, I'm not going to expose the darkness and the evil that is Islam. I'm not going to do it alone. So God said, you can count on me. I'll be right there with you. Well, of course he agreed to it. That's what he wanted to do. If you ask God for what he's already committed to do and wants to do,
he'll always say yes.
You can be a really, really shrewd negotiator, because you're going to get exactly what you want. I highly recommend asking God to do what he's already promised to do and wants to do, because it'll make you feel really good when you find out that he agrees. You can really pat yourself on the back and say, wow, I really pulled one off there. Well, that's what Dode is saying. Well, it's important for me to be a light in these dark places, and that we should show character and conviction and courage. It's why I'm so frustrated with people when they just won't take a stand. They don't seem to even care that the world is falling apart around them. I don't care anymore. It's like, okay, so what? Well, Dode was never so what. He cared. This is where we left off last week. It's Mizmor, Psalm 23:4. Your scepter and your people and your staff, they comfort and they console me. These are two interesting words. Shabbat, which is your implement, your nation, and your staff, which is Mishingach, your personalized and sturdy stick, the applicable stem of the ideal length and girth to guide the flock and support the walk. They comfort and console me. They can change the minds of those who are open to relenting, and therefore they encourage me. So scepter, the first thing we think about as scepter is that the scepter is the authority, the symbol of authority in ancient Israel and with Yahudah to govern. And so by saying your scepter comforts me, Dode is saying that the right to lead comforts me. Now, I'm here to tell you, I don't get it. I've led my share of organizations, and I never want to do it again. I didn't find any comfort or consolation in doing it. I am delighted that Dode's coming back, and he's going to be the King of Kings. That's his job. I wouldn't even want to be the doorman in an administration trying to herd these cats. Not me. But so I don't think that he really means that that God giving him the responsibility to shepherd the people was a comfort, because done it enough, not at that scale, obviously, to know it's not a comfort, it's an irritant and aggravation. But Shabbat means a lot of other things. It can mean your implement, your nation, and your people. So Yahweh's people, the covenant family, now I'm all over that. I find comfort. I find consolation. I find encouragement in the family. And I find the implements that Yahweh uses to be very comforting. By the way, I wrote something as I was editing one of the early chapters in Yada Yahweh, trying to edit all of it, and I was dealing with where Yahweh said, let there be light, and there was light. And what that means is that Yahweh spoke the universe into existence. That's something we've always known and recognized. But if Yahweh spoke the universe into existence, the cause of causation was words, his words. And if Yahweh's words caused the universe to exist, that makes Yahweh's words far more powerful than the universe they created. And therefore, the Word of God that we study within the Torah and prophets is more powerful than the entire universe. So we ought to really prize and value the Word of God. Anyway, so this says, your scepter and your people, your implement, your nation, as well as your staff. He was the shepherd. Therefore, he was very familiar with the staff. It's that stem that has a bent over element of it, and in Lamed, the staff is upside down from the way that a religious buffoon would hold it. They hold it because they wanted to show their source of power. A shepherd would place it upside down.
Yeah. Right,
because the crook was designed to be able to guide a sheep or to be able to lift them out of harm's way.
Right.
So, and that was the heavier part of it too, that if you had to go whack a wolf, something was trying to attack, or a snake, if you held the unhooked end, you're going to have more success beating a snake out of the way, or whacking a predator with it the way that it is deployed in the Lamed. So the staff
as well.
Right. So the Yahweh's implements, his people, his staff, all of those things are a comfort, and they console a shepherd, because the shepherd knows what to do with them. Did you study these words, Kurt, where you were found
Well,
what I may have
have the
missed.
notes. I don't have the notes on that, but Shabbat starts out with the shin. I mean, the nourishing word symbol. It's the first letter. Then it goes to a bet, which is the family home, and then they're leading to the T, which is the upright pole, the Zion. So the
and the enclosure with the signature on it, right?
Well, if it's a TH, a fet, then of course, because they're both interchangeable as far as meanings. You need to look both every time you do. You have an enclosure, of course, and you put valuables in a basket to keep them and protect them. So everything about it is what you're.
Whether it's the upright pole with the cross beam on it, which is the doorway to life, or it's the signature and being collected as part of a harvest with a signature on it. Nourishing words and family, home, signature with words on it, and the upright pole that becomes both the doorway to life is Pesach, and the Edon, the upright pole that holds up the tent of the witness, enlarges.
Tent of the witness.
Sure. That's how you get, by the way, from that word, your people, your nation, your implement, comes through those letters. And if you want to get scepter from a right to rule, well, you rule based upon Yahweh's words regarding the family, particularly as it was revealed in concert with the tent of the witness and Pesach with the doorway of life. Yep.
He never ruled by any words of his own. These are inspired by Yahweh. He's reading. He's teaching us out of the Torah. So. It's a different connotation when you think about ruling a king somewhere. So, everything is perfect here.
You have prepared a table before me in the presence of my adversaries. I must have read this 1,000 times, and every time I'd say, why would you want a table in front of your adversaries? Why would you want a table in front of your adversaries? I want a table in a peaceful place. I want it overlooking a beach or overlooking a beautiful view or underneath a nice umbrella. I want a table that's in a very peaceful place. The last place I'd want a table is in front of my adversaries. But what would you be doing with a table in front of your adversaries?
Well, one thing you're putting on is a display. It's also a place where you eat. It has 4 legs on it, according to the definition of that particular word of table, which it has meanings of 4, which trial and testing and so forth. But there's also there are tables where they put the showbread and everything, and the witnesses things. So all of those things are. But I think it's more in this particular connotation. I think it's more because he is showing off before those people. Because I thought this whole thing from 23:5 and 6. When you get to 23:5 and 6, I went through the whole thing and got not a different take, but another take on it. Is that this is foretelling? He's really foretelling his time in the future when he returns, and it's also about him invading. It's also about him. It can be physical conflict as well as it can be verbal conflicts. I think you're at
it now. That if you are at a table before your enemies, chances are you're sitting behind the table. And the only reason tables are only used to place things on top of, right?
Yeah.
There is no indication that it would be prudent to place your food. Decide this would be a good time for a snack in front of one's enemies.
No, probably not.
Okay. So why the table? If he's sitting behind the table, he's likely a judge.
Yes.
If he's sitting behind a table, is reading the condemnation of his adversaries. He's reading the evidence against them. He's judging them. If he's sitting behind the table, he's got a scroll of the Torah open, and he is explaining to his adversaries, this is the reason you're being condemned. I think that's what the table is.
I absolutely think that's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because the table is in the presence of our enemy. The table's not back there in the pasture. The table's not by the still waters, where we're having a picnic. No. This table is before the presence of his enemies, of his Sa'ar. Now, Sa'ar is the word that led you probably to this conclusion. The time of Jacob's troubles, the time,
yes,
the final 3.5 years of the tribulation, and to some degree all 7 years, and to some degree what we're witnessing right now, because Black Lives Matter is insanely anti-Semitic. That Sa'ar is the time of Jacob's, of Yisrael's Sa'ar. And so when you see that word, it speaks of narrowing something, which is what's happening when Israel is forced to give up Gaza and Jerusalem and the West Bank, which the world is going to compel them to give up. It means to narrow, to confine, to oppose, trouble, to be hostile towards, which is what the world is increasingly doing. And so Dod is returning in the time of Jacob's Sa'ar, and this table that is being prepared before the Sa'ar, the time of Jacob's troubles.
Let me add a little more weight to it if I can. Tsar is also to bind, so he's attacking religion. He's to make narrow Israel, which what I wrote down is at the waist, when they do it to the waist, and make them impossible to defend. To besiege is also Tsar, which is Jerusalem is going to be besieged by 150 million or however millions Muslims come. It also means to distress and to harass and show hostility towards. Then it goes on to my adversaries. But then I looked at the letters, and then Tsar is, the Tsad and the two Roshas, which mean to press in, to confine and restrict to a tight place. It also means troubles, and think of Jacob's troubles. Pangs, we hear that term a lot for this same period because it's birth pangs. And all these are the same word. To press in and own, and then I went to the two-letter root, which is just minus one rosh, or resh if you prefer. It means to press and to shine, and you say, well, what about shine? Well, shine is he's shining light on that because he's going to shine as bright as the sun. So I'm going into the future. His second approach, his second time he's here, more so than what he was doing then. To crush, to strike, to tear, also is the enemy. So you're presiding in or own someone or something or place that has been narrowed. So he's presiding over that on that table. So it all joined, to me, it all made total sense. But as long as I started out, in fact, that's where I did start out, is this is a future event also being predicted of what's he's going to do when he returns, and showing us that picture as well as what you presented. I think.
It's interesting in this word. You have pictures of three different men. First, you have man following man. So the two Roshas, the last one is looking at the one preceding it. So you have man looking to man following man. Which is religious man, political man, military man. So that speaks volumes of this particular time and trouble. And then you have the picture of man laying down. It's a picture of man in the throes of death, man becoming complacent, man no longer willing to stand up and work. So men leading men to the point that men become apathetic and just give up.
Yeah, that's why it's quite a negative word. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the only way that a rosh works for example, is when
he's
Rosh
looking at the Torah or
is looking at
with
something, is directed to a letter in Yahweh's name or to something beneficial. But when the Rosh is looking to another man, and that man is looking to lay down and just give up, be apathetic, we got a problem. There are a few TS words, Tazde words, that have positive connotations, like Sion is one of them, the signs posted along the way. But almost every time, I've translated now for the last 20 years, almost every time I'm translating, and the first letter is a Tazde, I'm saying, uh-oh, this is not going to be good.
Probably not.
Tazde words where man is just giving up, is apathetic, is laying down. Tazde words are not good. There's two or three of them that can be positive, but on the whole, you need to cringe every time you see one. Yeah, this is a clue. This is not going to be. This is not going to be good, because it's the opposite of what Yahweh was looking for. Yahweh wants us to be observant. Now, the Rosh can speak of an observant, thinking man, looking out with our eyes, listening with our ears, thinking with our mind. But when the Rosh is looking at another Rosh, then you're observing your fellow man. You're thinking about your fellow man. You're listening to your fellow man, which is, after a while, you just lay down and give up, because there's no substance, no benefit from men. It says, you have anointed my head with oil. Dashen. Dashen is the word that we realized was anointed, even as we were translating the 22nd in this form. Dashen, covered, rubbing, preparing. And this particular statement, every English Bible knows that Dashen means to anoint my head with oil. Well, what this is saying is that while Yahweh instructed Shamuel to anoint Dode when he was 8 years old, and Shamuel placed the oil, the anointing oil on Dode, making Dode the Messiah. And he was anointed 2 more times, 3 times in all. What Dode is saying, and he's inspired when he says it, is that, okay, so it was Shamuel. But you were doing so on the instructions of Yahweh. So Yahweh's preference is to always work through people. So Yahweh used Shamuel as an implement, such that it was Yahweh who made the choice to anoint Dode. And his feet weren't anointed. His hands weren't anointed. The arm that threw the stone was not anointed. It was his head. Why? Because your head is your eyes to see, the Rosh again, and head is Rosh. The letter Rosh, the R, which is the first letter in this, is self-defining. Rosh is head, and in fact, Rosh here is 2 letters. It's which is 3 letters, but the last is the Shin, which is the words.
But look what he's looking at.
Right. So then, part being anointed is his ability to be observant, to be contemplative, and then based upon what he hears, what he sees in the Word of God, to be able to speak.
Yeah.
That's what's being anointed.
Yeah.
And oil, symbol of the Spirit. What happened when first time that Dode is anointed the first thing we hear by Shamuel is that the Spirit of Yahweh came on him in a very powerful way and never left him. Now, what's interesting about that is, therefore, the Spirit of God made him courageous, or more courageous than he would have otherwise been. The Spirit of God caused him to see more insights into the Word of God than he would have otherwise, made him more articulate than he would have been otherwise, helped him to transition from knowing to understanding in a superior way than would have occurred otherwise. caused him to live a long life, protected him, caused him to appear perfect in God's eyes, even though he was flawed. That the Spirit of Yahweh coming upon him created all those positive things, enriched him, empowered him, protected him, encouraged him, emboldened him, enlightened him, all of those things. And yet, the Spirit of Yahweh that comes upon each of us when we're born into the covenant family, it only makes us perfect in God's eyes.
Yes.
We're still capable of our flaws. I still constantly mispronounce words. I do my best to provide insights as I'm doing these translations, and yet so many times I miss things that, we see the second time through, the third, the fourth. It doesn't make us perfect in this realm. God doesn't want us to be perfect in this realm. God wants us to strive.
We knew everything would be blind. Anyway.
Yeah, he wants it to be work, because work is a good thing.
Let me toss another one at you. In anointing.
Yes.
There's a two-letter root rather, which is the delet and the shin. It means to thresh. Now think about it. This is David. And the grain on the threshing floor and crush it to separate the hull from the grain. And it's a back and forth movement and pressure are the two symbols there. So you've got another dode moment right in there and anointed. So plus obviously we may not have mentioned the fact that it's used for light. The anointing of the oil is the light to light your path and so forth. So that's
so you've got even dashed.
Wow.
You've got the left, which is the doorway. You've got the shin, which is the nourishing words, and the nun that causes, which is the sperm,
the family,
to be a child.
The people.
So the doorway through the nourishing words is what causes us to be children of God, which is the word for anointed. And the anointing is our head, where we are observant, where we listen to what God has to say, and we process it. And then, of course, as you said, with oil, shemen, which is, again, nourishing words, the life-giving and cleansing properties of water, the mem, leading to us becoming the children of God, the nun.
All of those.
Marvelous language.
Ruach Kodesh right there. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. You can't miss the point if you look.
Right. My cup overflows with abundance. No. Doe is not talking about a cup. He's not holding a cup. There's no holy grail here. It's the word binds me not in the constrictive sense, but makes me my attributes and my personality and my attitude and all the stuff that makes me who I am, that brings all of this together. That cup overflows with abundance, with help of Yah, saturated and satisfied. And I think that is one of the most underrated concepts in Torah, satisfying. Because no matter what man does, man is never satisfied. If you're a lover, there's never enough love. If you're a greedy, there's never enough money. If you want power, you're never satiated with power. What it is, man is never satisfied. And yet with Yah in the covenant, we're satisfied. We want nothing more. The only thing we would view as additive is learning is good, more learning is better. The family is good, more family is better. And while there is a personal benefit for learning and understanding, for the most part we learn and understand to encourage and help others. So it's a built-in satisfaction. It's why we speak so little of salvation And we realized that Yasha, the Hebrew word that is translated salvation, is far more about freedom and deliverance. What we gain in the covenant relationship is freedom, liberty, deliverance from harmful influences. And as a result, we're really not all that interested in salvation. It's a byproduct of all of the benefits of the covenant relationship and just genuine satisfaction. So no, we're going to a better place. That our last name is Yahweh's name. Very relaxing. It's very satisfying. It's why Dode could walk through the depressions and human systems and confront them and never have any concern or fear. So, marvelous place
Well, let me ask you one quick question. You're on Yah, right? Okay, and that's from the verb rawah, which is to drink or fill, to satisfy, to satiate, and soak or overflow with abundance. Interesting little side note. The two-letter root is a rosh and a hey, which not only means soak but also means lion, like Yehuda was a lion.
Yeah.
Who puts this together?
Right. Yeah, the land over.
We're talking about
the promised land is an abundant place.
Yeah.
The
so
spiritual
the family of Yehud related to Yah.
Satisfied. One of the things that God is very keen on is not trying to paint a picture of the spiritual realm that would cause one to say, well, boy, I've got to get a piece of that. Look at all those riches. Or, he's not Allah with, boy, you come there and you get comfy sofas and 72 virgins. No, it's not decadent. He's not trying to bring in the lustful or the greedy. It's his home. It's a satisfied and comfortable place. It's a place where we will have an abundance of life and opportunity, but God's not bragging about it. He's not saying, man, I created really big mansions here for you. Wait till you see the comfy beds and the luxurious fabrics and all the good eats. That's not what he's saying.
That's how religion presents it.
That's right. That's how religion presents it. But God just presents it.
They want to bribe you into it.
Right. It's my home, and you can rest assured it'll be satisfying. It's a sufficient abundance there that it'll be good. You'll like it. Trust me on this. But I think that's the way it should be. You either like Yahweh or you don't. You either trust Yahweh or you don't. You either want to spend eternity with him or you don't. You either like the Torah or you don't. You think that the covenant makes sense or you don't. That you are Torah observant or you're not. You're Mikre attending or not. It's, do you like who God is, what he's offering, and do you accept what he is requesting of us in return? If you do, great. Welcome to the family. If you don't,
you're free to go on.
You're free to go.
Yeah.
God's not going to bribe you. And he's not going to threaten you. He's not going to say, hey, if you don't accept my deal, I'm going to see to it that you're tortured forever. Well, then who in their right mind would turn it down, even if they had no clue who God is? So it's important in this case to recognize that Yahweh is simply inviting us to be part of his family. And if that's of interest, if you like his personality and approach, if you think work is cool and that learning is cool and that exploring is cool, if you like that stuff, you're going to be delightful.
Come on down.
It's going to be satisfying. If it isn't, it'd be irritating. You'd be irritating to the rest of us. So satisfaction is a really good term. It's a comforting term. It's a Yahowah term, non-gloating. All right, it's a good spot for us to stop for this evening. We'll pick it up. It won't be quite as newsy next week, but we hadn't talked about the news in a while. And in this particular case, fellas, the news defines the time that we're in. It defines why we're on the cusp of the time of Yaakov's troubles, why it's important to listen now, because there's not going to be a lot of tomorrows. You can't postpone it. If you want to know Yahowah, devote the time and do it now, because there's not going to be a whole lot of tomorrows left.
No, here. All righty, guys.
Yeah, good to have you back, JB. Back to
glad to be back.
To duty. Back to duty, Kirk. We're hoping the best for you and for Terry, and it's great to have you again, JB. Good night.
Thank you.
May God bless.
Good night. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.